I'm gonna send a video to you and short video, and it just sort of fits in with like, what the fuck, America?
It
I don't
opens up
we
so many different topics.
uh, it's on its way to your messages. Um, but yeah, so
So, real quick, since I'm still waiting on it to get here anyway, did you see a snippet about Orange Turd being entered into the public record in
no.
the yeah. So I don't know the context. I didn't go back and look, but apparently something in the
I don't think you have to.
no, you
It's
don't.
pretty ubiquitous,
Um,
the context.
but Donald Trump is now referred to an official record as Orange Turd as a result of the Stormy Daniels hush money case. Again, don't know the details, but I saw that headline and I debated about clicking it and reading further and thought, nope, I don't even want to know. That's good
No, you don't
enough.
need to. That's all I need. You could throw that in after the outro.
Yeah. I still haven't had anything come through. I assume it's just slow.
It's a video. It's like a 2-minute video.
Oh, did you send the
Still.
actual video? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that explains it.
Um,
That makes a lot more sense. So while we wait, I decided I was going to record like a speaker reel, as though I were a public speaker, and maybe add that as another realm of, hey, this is something I'll do just for whatever. Um, that was actually how I learned that I had a gaping hole on trying to do any kind of cinematography where I was in front of the camera, because I was so used to being behind the camera. It's like I set up stuff, good to go as far as I knew, and then go back and look at it later, and it's like, oh fuck, that's out of focus, or I don't like the framing that shot. Like, it's funny how easy it is to make those mistakes when you're not actually behind the camera. Because I would flip the LCDs out, but I couldn't actually
yeah,
really
that's too
see it.
small.
You know?
That's too
Yeah.
small.
There we go. It came through finally. Let's see. Oh, now it has to download on my end. Hold on.
You're welcome.
Yeah. It should be pretty quick.
It looks like this is from about a week.
Man, this is going really slow compared to my speed, so messages must have some buffering thing. I mean, not surprising. I know Apple throttles all sorts of shit, so as slow as it's going, I should have you just turn up the volume on your side, because I could hear snippets in the background. I don't understand why Apple services throttle the way they do. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen iCloud do it, or iCloud. I've seen the Photos library do it, where
Right,
like uploading and sharing, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. I don't understand.
I'm sure it has
So,
something to do with the end-to-end connection.
does Apple use is everything? So, is everything on iCloud owned by Apple, with the
I,
exception of China?
I think so.
Like, they're not using AWS or any of Google's services.
Yeah, I don't think they are. I mean, I have not
I
seen
don't think
any
so
of the.
either.
I've actually been running Little Snitch recently just to kind of get a feel for the connections between the OS and anything else with Apple services. I have not seen anything with Apple apps or services connecting to anything non-Apple related so far. Not to say that there aren't exceptions, but generally speaking, I have not had any indication that Apple utilizes a third party for anything with regard to iCloud services.
Whenever somebody would come to the Apple store and they had Little Snitch running, I'd be like, no.
I don't really like running it, and I don't know why. I think it's just because it's
It's a pain in the ass.
it depends on how you have it set up. Like, I don't have it set where I have to approve everything. I'll have it automatically approved, but then I can go back and look.
I think for if you're just using it for logging, that's a pretty good idea. I need to use my little Mac Mini to do a little. I want to start logging specific devices on, and I'm assuming that I can do that somehow with server sitting there. But I don't know enough, and I haven't dived into it enough. But I want to do that.
You mean any device that is seen on the network, have it log it?
not like there's specific like so I just want to I kind of like I want to log what activity my children's devices like what websites they're going to.
Okay. I follow.
That kind of thing.
Hmm.
As a parental control thing, and I haven't really looked into it, so I'm not asking. I'm not even asking to be pointed in their direction, but at some point it may become a discussion. Just because.
So I don't know if things have changed, but the last time I looked at options, I was thoroughly disappointed in what I might be able to do with any native stack.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. When you say native stack, you mean
Anything that is not just a third-party app running on top of the OS. So, like, I could theoretically, when I was looking at it, I could have stood up a DNS server and do some other things where I could kind of get a feel for what things were doing. But if anybody was even remotely tech savvy and went around that local server, I would be blind, which was why I chose to go the Firewalla route as a traffic inspector device, because then even if they weren't using my internal DNS, I was still seeing some level of inspection on traffic going around it. So
there's something out there that can do this.
yeah, I mean there are ways to do that on the Mini as well. Like you could make it a forced local DNS that if it wasn't using it, it would not resolve to anything else either. Like there are plenty of ways to make a scenario work where you were just running some server locally. I just ended up going the route of, you know what, I don't want to configure some of this stuff, and I don't want it dependent on me running something on top of the OS. I would rather have transparent traffic inspection and the ability to turn around and block activity at the network level than to rely on blocking it at an application level. So it all depends on how you.
No, that's definitely the way I'd want to go with this. And at this point, I'm only mentioning the Mac Mini as like, if nothing else, it would be involved as a place for the, logs to be written.
You could still do it. I mean, there's so many different options. Truly, like if I had decided I wanted to take more time to do it myself, I would have just stood up a Linux VM running something like iPerf or any number of other applications and have everything go through it and achieve the same result that I'm achieving with the Firewalla. I just kind of wanted to go platform agnostic and have a network device dedicated to what I wanted at the time. So when you do want recommendations, there are plenty of ways we could go about like having a discussion about it too, if you don't come up with something in the meantime. You could honestly probably do a lot of it with the Amplify.
See, I was thinking that like I couldn't because I didn't think there were a lot of options on the Amplify. Like
Yeah, as you say that, it may just be a pure block or allow option.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it. So it might be more of a UDM thing where you could make a few more robust rules. But
I kind of need to figure out what I want to do, and then like like I have a vague idea of what I want to do. When I have a more solid idea of what I want to do, then I can start to flesh it out. So
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you just want the Mini to do logging, you could run a VM with Elasticsearch in the back end, pulling in logs from PacketBeat, LogBeat kind of thing, and have that like the behavior logged there, and then have some other device controlling it upstream or downstream or whatever.
okay.
There are plenty of ways to tackle the problem for sure. I initially had looked at. Have you heard of Disney's Circle thing for parental controls? It's basically a little network device that you would buy. I don't remember there being a subscription, but you would buy their thing and you'd kind of have everything route through it. And I looked closer at what it was doing, and it was basically the same kind of thing. It was internal DNS. Well, why am I going to pay for that instead of just running my own thing? So when I looked at it, it was like, okay, this doesn't. I could bypass this if I knew what I was doing. So this doesn't fit the bill for what I want. Whereas the firewall, if you have encrypted network traffic, yes, you're still going to get through, because I don't know of anything that easily and quickly decrypts network traffic on the fly. Like, breaking that encryption is just difficult. So if it's encrypted traffic, you're kind of SOL. But if it's unencrypted traffic, or if it's through initiating the connection through the browser and then encrypting post connectivity, then there are still avenues available for blocking that traffic. And then, of course, if there are specific ports in use, or application signatures, like it does more than just basic port traffic shaping, which was why I settled on that as being my initial pass at it. Realistically, I still am not happy with my solution either, but I'm also not at a point where Jacob has unfettered access to a computer to try to do things. So
yeah,
I've got a couple of years to try to figure out how I really want to approach it.
Well, my kids don't have unfettered access either, but I'm kind of leaning getting, given that they have more access in in 2024 than they've had before. And I'm really not so worried about them. It's more along the lines of, like, I want them to be, and this is so very different than my upbringing, but I wanted them to be, have a healthy understanding of, what the things that are important are things like we talked about, and like consent, and like ethical pornography. And, it's one of those things where, like, they're going to go looking for, you remember what it is like to be a teenage boy. You're going to go look for it.
And I remember the Sears catalog like that.
Me too. I can
it's
remember.
So different now, though. I mean,
it is. Like, it is, because
it's different in the level of access you have to other materials, but it's no different in mentality. So I get the parallel for sure.
Well, I was going to say, but the thing that I want, that my parents had no chance of ever having, is I want to be able to say to my kids, like, hey, you know what? There's a lot out there, and I can try to stop you from doing it, but I will. It's relatively futile. I can stop you from some stuff, but it's relatively futile. But, if I can say to them, I can see everything that's going on, and if I think there's something that we need to talk about, we're going to have to talk about it. So if you look at something, make sure that you're okay with having a conversation about it.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
the only reason I paused is because I was kind of mulling it over. Like, would that be consistent messaging that I would want to use? And I think so. Like, we're early enough in this journey in general that I haven't had to think as much about it, but it's been in the back of my mind, right? So it was more a matter of, okay, I know this is going to be something I'm going to have to think about. Taking it from this perspective, is this an approach that I would also take? And I think so. Like, I don't have any kind of immediate rebuttal for sure, and it sounds reasonable, but that doesn't mean that I've had time to digest whether that would be my approach or not. Is the whole thing that I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, like, I can remember when my children were Jacob's age, and it was just like, at that age, it's like you're just afraid of what's going to find them. Like, you're more concerned about what's going to find them, maybe what they might stumble onto that's going to, like, give them cause for concern.
The big thing that I'm concerned about is just bullying at school more than anything else. Like, I would much rather him discover porn or something else than, it's He's not at the age where he is emotionally capable of understanding the difference between bullying and manipulative behavior and just general goading from somebody else, right? Like it's more that I'm concerned about than accidentally stumbling upon this other material. Because this other material, at this age, I could say, yeah, you're probably going to be more interested in that in a couple of years. Like right now, you just need to ignore it. And he would probably say, okay, and go about his day. It wouldn't be quite that simple, but it would be along those lines for sure. Because right now, there's still no real interest in anything other than a good fart joke. Yeah. Um, but but that isn't to say that I haven't had that thought in the back of my head, because I tend to try to find ways to prepare myself for what the next evolution of concerns are, even though I know I can't realistically do so. It's the fun of being a behavioral sciences person. Like I have all of these different things from different, milestones and everything else that I know I have to keep in mind, and I know I'm not going to be prepared for, but I'm trying my damnedest to be prepared for it anyway, kind of thing. So at this stage, based on conversations and maturity and things that even remotely interest him for discussion, even if he happened across porn, it would just be I don't like this and turn it off kind of thing. So it's funny, but it's an acknowledgement of I get what you're trying to say, because there's not a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Recently, so Jude has a Meta Quest 2, and he got it for Christmas, and and then the Apple Vision Pro came out, about a month later, and I was talking to him about it, and he said that sounds cool, and then I said the only thing is there aren't really any games for it. He's like, I don't want that. That sounds terrible. But I got an email because I don't remember who on the day that both he and his brother, they had been playing a game on it, like when one wasn't playing, the other was, and it's a game where I can hear them interacting with other kids and other players, and the game is like a school game, so they're like somebody is the teacher, and then there's a bunch of kids in the classroom, and it's kind of hilarious to listen to. And I think the teacher is given tasks to have the children, the students do, and so that's what I can gather from what I've heard. And they're in the same room as me playing the game, and I hear them yelling, and and it's all like it's the same way that I see them playing with their friends. And I got an email from MetaQuest with like a code of conduct violation, and they're like, on this day, somebody was abusive or violent or so on and so forth, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And there's in the email that I think there was a link to request a review. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And so I didn't know what to do. I was thinking, because I heard them. I was like, did I hear 100% of their conversation? I didn't. No, I can't say 100%. But I'm like, I heard them. I heard the majority of it, and I know who they are, or at least I think I know who they are. And I was like, that doesn't seem it doesn't seem like them. So I just pushed the request a review, and then within 24 hours, they're like, oh, sorry, we made it. Basically, sorry, we made a mistake. Email from them. So, so then I was like, go ahead.
I was just saying, it sounds a lot like kind of keyword.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or just maybe even raised voices. I wondered about that because I can't see them. I don't know. So when I did the review, I got it back and it said, yeah, sorry. Nope, not a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I guess somebody could be smart enough for like increase in volume, because you could monitor that on a waveform and extrapolate something from it algorithmically. But even then, I would think that would be less likely than a specific word. You know, it's,
Well, I wonder if there's like a combination of things.
oh, I'm sure.
More than likely,
Like
yeah.
I would, in this day and age, I would be surprised if something was triggered on
Single
a
trigger.
like this particular
Singles.
keyword happens. Yeah. But it,
I mean, there's a lot of video. I mean, you can see how videos on social media are made now, and the words that people use. You know, it's like, you know, at some point, when is unalive going to be the same thing as dying?
yes.
Because like you can't,
Yeah.
for whatever like even in an appropriate context, you can't say dying, and people have started saying unaliving. Man, it's gonna fuck up the dictionaries.
That assumes dictionaries aren't already fucked. I mean, that's the first rebuttal that comes to mind.
I mean, it's gonna really fuck them up.
Yeah,
It's gonna take it to the next level.
Every thought I come back to, it's probably a combination of keywords that are relatively esoteric and benign in and of themselves, but there's some threshold of, oh, these 3 or 4 words were hit as opposed to this 5th or 6th one kind of thing. You know, like it feels like it would be something on the cusp of a problem, which would be why programmatically you could make a case for, oh, it being flagged, and then a fairly quick review saying, yeah, we made a mistake. Like I think that's more what guides my thought process is programmatically you hit these 1 or 2 or 3 words together, and then a human review, it's like, oh, that was wrong, blah 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 blah, mumbling under the breath kind of thing, just shoving it under the, like it's that's what I envision.
So silly.
Yeah. And I mean, I can see that happening easily on any platform because of how content moderation is such a difficult subject in and of itself. Like it's, how would I describe that? Thinking about
it's
content,
one of the worst things.
yeah, I mean, thinking about content moderation, and you really see it with regard to social networks, is how can you easily enforce content moderation and not infringe on, First Amendment rights, for example? Or,
Well, do we have First Amendment rights on social media platforms?
I argue you do not.
I don't think we do. Yeah, I don't think we do.
Yeah, I argue you do not, because it's a private institution, and therefore you're subject to whatever the rules of that private institution are, and you can go fuck yourself with regard to any constitutional right. But,
right,
you know,
if our government, says, "Hey, here's a forum where you can go and discourse can be had," whatever that may be, that would be, I would expect to be covered under First Amendment rights, unless they wrote something otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree. I know this wasn't the topic, but I wanted to kind of devolve into it a little bit.
Yeah, let's do.
The arguments against free speech on social media have always bothered me, because free speech is bastardized in so many different ways that I have difficulty accepting the arguments on any public platform. And what I mean by that is most proponents of free speech talk about protections for, basically, you can say whatever you want and nobody can chastise you for it. The problem is that's not a proper interpretation of free speech. Free speech would be that you can express your viewpoints and you can say things as long as they don't harm another group.
Right. Like, hate crimes are not covered by free speech.
Correct. Or
hate speech is not covered by
and I think the easier way to even describe it is if you go back to the movie theater example, where you cannot yell fire in a movie theater because it's a violation of cultural norms that causes harm as people attempt to escape a potentially hazardous situation. That is not protected under free speech, under the First Amendment. And people tend to lose sight of that when arguing about free speech protections with regard to social media. And it's even further complicated. And this transition is where I find it so problematic. Any social media platform is technically a private entity, and free speech is not protected under any even remotely potentially applicable guideline or anything else under private entities. Like you can't argue free speech on a private platform. Like that's just because it is published publicly does not mean it is a public platform. And that's the part that has always confused me about why these arguments are even had. Because as soon as it is a privately controlled platform, even if it's to shareholders, it's still privately controlled. It means you have no argument whatsoever for free speech.
Right. I'd even say it's not even a platform, a public forum of any sort, because there is it's credentials are required.
Well,
no, and again,
and to compound that, you can make your timeline private, where it has to be approved by you for someone to view what you say. Like there's so many pieces to that I've just never understood the free speech argument with regard to any social media platform in the first place, because it takes such a bastardized leap to get to that argument in the first place.
Well, we have a woefully uninformed populace.
That is putting it mildly. Should we talk about this clip that you sent? I finally got a chance to.
Yeah. Did you watch it yet?
I did.
Okay.
I had to turn away and laugh. How I don't even know how I would introduce it.
I mean, you can bumper it in with free speech, and that these people have the free speech to say this bullshit.
Yeah, that's about the only way to do so. Apparently, it is possible for us to devolve into a directly elected democracy. Is basically the gist of, like, is there any different way you could explain that at a high level? Like, we'll get into the kind of the details, but apparently the argument is that directly elected officials are problematic.
There's a concern. There are some concerned citizens that they're concerned that we're devolving into a direct democracy. And I remember from my conservative high school education, some of the teachers talking about, there was a, very much talking about the problem, that the United States is not a direct democracy. It's a democracy within a republic, and that's I was too young at the time to understand a couple of things. The founding if you were to ask the founding fathers what we should be doing or what they were intended, they'd be like, we intended for you to figure it out for yourselves for as society. We just tried to make it so that you couldn't change on a whim. It had to be, there was a significant barrier to change, but not an impossible one. And so, yeah, I think that's thing number one, is that the framers were just doing the best they could with what they had. At some point, the Electoral College was a we don't know what else to do.
I want to pick at that for a moment. Mostly because there have been plenty of arguments, especially in recent years, against the Electoral College. And I get the arguments. I understand why. Because how else could a winner of the popular vote not win an election? I understand the arguments in and of themselves. But I also understand the desire to keep a heavily populated state that might be more homogenous in views from being able to control the entirety of the nation. And it's difficult to reconcile how the Electoral College helps against, say, New York and California deciding every election, as opposed to the popular vote, which does include a large swath of the rest of America, right? Like I'm not saying that New York and California should decide or shouldn't decide the vote. It's more, those are the most heavily populated states, or at least last I looked, they were. In the popular vote, you can see a pretty decent distribution of the desires for government that doesn't necessarily match what you get with the Electoral College. But how else would you offset high density population areas from exerting even more influence over general elections? And obviously that is a purely devil's advocate argument.
Yeah.
Because even I have a difficult time swallowing it. But like I recognize there's a concern there. And there was a concern from the forefront of, as populations shift and move, we don't want everyone to just congregate in one concise area and control everything. So I understand there was a reason it was thought out and implemented in the first place. Do I think it has overstayed its welcome? Yes. But at the same time, how else would you reconcile what it attempted to mitigate? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, I think that's I think that's kind of the whole point of how this government was put together, is like, there are things that they probably had, clear ideas of how they wanted to do it. And there were things where like, let's see if this works. And, and all manner of things in between. And the thing that I think was probably, significant, decidedly so, is that it was like, you can change this. Like, if something's not working, it can be changed. So,
yeah, I mean, overall, that's the one thing that we tend to forget, because there's too much emphasis on everything other than change.
Right. Like, we're not here to preserve a unique garden and in a vacuum. We're here to
evolve and become the better version of ourselves. Like at the end of the day, that is the framework that was provided.
Yeah, and it includes not trampling on our rights, but we can all look at it and be like, well, if that right that you have, we've decided, we've noticed that it's infringing on the rights of others, and so we got to make some decisions, like, yeah, and it's and at the end of the day, it's like, what do we want? Because we can choose. It's like if 90% of Americans said, you know what, free speech is probably not the best. It's hard for me, and I'm sure it's hard for you to understand how that would ever be a good idea. But if for some reason the majority of people thought it was a good idea, even if it's a bad idea, they can choose bad ideas.
The only thing that I could think of as you were describing it is that if the majority of people decided that the orange turd was best for 2024, it would be really difficult for me to accept that outcome. But there's nothing that you said that is not applicable to that outcome.
Yeah.
I had to bring the orange turd into the.
Yeah. No, it's. I want to know I want to know where that came. I mean,
Eventually I'm gonna have to go back and look because all I saw was the snippet and I didn't see it again afterwards. But it just
I watched the Stormy Daniel documentary on Peacock, and I don't recall that term coming up in that.
Didn't even realize it was a documentary. Isn't it a little bit too early for a documentary? Don't we have to get through the trial before there's a documentary?
No, apparently not. Because you know what, with the excuse me, with the with streaming services, I mean, it's just like you just throw another episode on. There's been a number of documentaries. Well, because they have documentaries broken. Instead of doing a documentary feature movie, there's documentary miniseries basically, and some of them have been popular enough that the documentarians were asked to go back and shoot additional episodes, and it's fantastic because you end up with, hey, however many episodes that were released, they were fantastic. People really enjoyed it. I was like, we need to do some follow up because, there's through social media or there's been discussion about this thing or that thing, and then you can get the subjects, if they're still alive, to come back and comment on those things, and it's been a really cool way to watch documentaries.
I probably need to actually look at more modern documentaries. I'm catching up with so much stuff in general, and especially over the past few weeks, I've been immersed in creating, or how I would go about creating similar content. I wanted to a handful of projects that would fall in the documentary space, but I don't know for sure that I'm ready to say more than that. I've got some ideas floating around. I want to solidify those things a little bit, but it's interesting to think about what could be an avenue for, I'm going to just say, less funded documentaries in this day and age that could probably be just as influential and prolific as those that are more heavily invested in traditional, like, Hollywood avenues.
I think that the barrier to entry that's been lowered more than anything has probably been for documentaries, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that general sentiment. Like there have been a few things I've looked at that have made me think I kind of want to back up and see if there's a possible project here. And I don't necessarily have that view in a lot of other areas. So, yeah, I mean, maybe more forthcoming. We'll use that as a teaser to round out the show, maybe. Just because it can be fun.
Your thoughts on us devolving into too much of a direct democracy?
It's difficult to say one way or another because on the one hand, I think that we are too... God, I don't even know how I would say that. I think we're too cognizant of different voices in a lot of areas, and at the same time too dismissive of disparate voices in others. Like I don't think from a political perspective we are devolving into too much of a direct democracy. I think we are attempting to negate and otherwise silence voices that are not our own, more so than having any specific political leaning one way or another. And it's driven more out of it's my view or no view mentality when there's no place for that in political discourse. And that's the problem.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work, or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.